a company and then add to it some of your culture? I don't have a clear answer. I have examples of a success from this and for this and failure for this and for that. Personally, I think if you go to strange market like China, I would say start from scratch, build the stuff, and then see if you can make an acquisition, or otherwise it might be more risky than that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Unfortunately, we only have about 10 minutes, so we have great representatives here from the waste and environment, from pharma, and Mickey and Yair from the defense. I'll let Avnimelech conclude this discussion with Mickey, Federmann, and Yair Shamir specifically about defense.
Okay, going into the specifics of the industries you represent, we start with the defense industry. You, Mickey, as the chairman of Elbit, Yair as the past chairman of Israel Aerospace Industries. We know that the defense industries are global, there are multinational companies, but still it's a protected sector with quite high government involvement and entry barriers. We wonder, how do you manage to find yourself in the markets, make the acquisitions, and overcome the barriers? And on the other hand, there is another aspect of government involvement, which is the offset policy. How does this influence your M&A activity in those markets? Mickey, please.
Well, it's certainly a very, very regulated market, you're right, and every country is different and depends on the technology. I mean, there are technologies in the United States where a foreign company, except maybe British Aerospace, but even the French and the Germans and the Italians are not allowed to invest in. Same with us Israelis. So you should know which areas you might be successful. You have to go through regulation, but there are areas in which, by definition, you know in advance, and it's not worthwhile to encrypt the radio transmission, for example, something a foreigner will not be able to invest in the United States, as an example. So you have to know what you're looking for and direct your attention and your efforts into those areas which are important for you and where you have a chance to invest. Secondly, you have to, this is already the art of doing business. You have to find the ways to convince the regulators that even though you are a foreign company owned, but you employ local personnel and your management is local, and you are how should I say, devoted to the interest of the countries, and I'll give you an example. In one important European country, we own a company whose CEO is the president of the Defense Industry Association. Non-Israeli, not even a Jew, works for Elbit, runs a local business, and is the president of the Association of the Defense Industries of that country. So what I'm trying to show you is that it's complex. It's in one country it's easier, in another it's more difficult. In some areas you are not allowed to invest at all. So you have to find your ways how to succeed. And you don't always succeed. Sometimes you ask for a permit to invest in a certain company, in the US and mainly, and you are not allowed. But same could happen in France or in England. So it's you are right, it's a regulated area for us.
Yair, is your experience the same, or maybe you have some different cases in your history?
No, the defense market is not a typical one. It's a relatively big market because there are wars and there are always the need for the product, unfortunately. But it's very regulated and very government control, I would say, environment. If we, for instance, in IAI, we took some steps in order to avoid some of the stuff. We tried to avoid tenders. especially in the Far East. If we don't have the feeling and understanding that we, for 100% or 99% will be winning, if we have went to this place in only to hurt our competitors. But because when you go to tenders, you're dead. You can't make any money. If you go as a single supplier, you can have the margins relatively in good, that you can sustain the business. In many cases, you compete against, or you have to team with another governmentally owned companies. We have done many business, a lot of transaction in India, but we were been forced to work with the governmentally owned defense companies in India, and they are not good enough. But we have to take them. So we have to make the job for them and pay them. And so it's a very difficult market. Technology-wise, as Mickey have said, there's a restriction of the authority in Israel, but also elsewhere, how to deal with IP here, how to deal with secret technology or national secret technologies. And there are ways to avoid it, but it's tough, and it takes a long time and money. I'll give an example. I have one like that in France, and I have one of that in the US. We built from scratch a company based on our technology. Not a single Israeli were among the employees or management. After we get some kind of recognition of local, the US Army or the Special Forces at that place, then we make an acquisition of an R&D company in US. And for us, it was a Chinese war. As an owner and as a top management, we couldn't do and control what they are doing. And this was the only way to continue to sell. So it's a risky stuff. It's a risky stuff, and you should be connected in this industry to the local congressmen or senators or whoever, and in some cases, the connection are in various levels. Otherwise, you can't make it. So defense is not, in Israel, at least in II, our intention when I was the chairman there is basically to make the profits and to use the profits to reinvest it for the benefits of the state of Israel and not really, not for any shareholders.
Thank you very much, both. And Chagai, why won't you take us with Chaim to another regulated industry?
Okay, so real quick, because we have about 3 minutes left, Chaim, maybe you can share with us a little bit of your experience with Europe again, where this is Go for Europe, and I think it was published last week that the European Union has actually relaxed some of the rules and regulations on the acceptance of certain procedures and products that are being manufactured here in Israel. I think you've been pivotal in this. You've been very instrumental. I think you've done this not only for TEVA, but maybe even for the smaller players in the pharma industry in Israel, which everybody should obviously be very happy about. What actually took place there? How long was the process? Again, in maybe in a minute or two, if you can share with us what actually happened.
Well, I think what in a nutshell, what Chagai is talking about is European pharmaceutical products were allowed to come into Israel freely without any checks. But Israeli products, pharmaceutical products coming from here to Europe had to go through a long check system that cost money and made things very long. It was a real Via Dolorosa, especially if you're a small exporter, it was a real nightmare. My colleagues and myself included in the Manufacturers Association started to deal with it. We met with the European Commission a couple of times, and they saw, I must say, from the very beginning, they saw the sense in what we say, and it took altogether about 5 years, and last week, 10 days ago, the European Parliament voted very favorably, and I think that both as Israelis and as Europeans, we should be proud and happy, because one thing for sure, it will increase the accessibility of high-quality products in Europe. And that's, I think, what we are all trying to do, to create higher accessibility. And on another matter, I think also that, like what Yair and Miki said, we're going to see more regulations, and we live in an area which is highly regulated as well. And I think that where you will see more interference than we ever did before is that governments in Europe are now feeling much more responsible than ever before about their citizens' health, which means that cost will be of high concerns to everybody. And just look at the last drastic steps which the Germans took last year, slashing prices 25% just overnight, higher pressures in the UK, France. So all of that is something we're going to see. And by the way, as an anecdote I will finish with that, to what Luke said, if you look at Italian hospitals today, have credit lines of over 400 days, and Spain is just approaching the 300 days. And I will not take you through all the countries, but this is a phenomenon that has been going for years, and we see it getting worse a little bit. Thank you.
I think we should say also thanks to the foreign minister that helped on this, and Daniel Elon was part of it.
Yes.
Right, and yeah, one last question to Luke real quick, if we have one more minute. Luke, when you look at your space, waste management, environmental industries, is there any targets that are breakthrough technologies? I mean, you come to Israel a lot, you're a tech guy, you're an investor in technologies, or do you prefer to do acquisitions of markets when you look at opportunities today?
Well, I will finish afterwards with the last opportunity that happened this morning as an anecdote. But I think that in our field, technology is very often still overpriced, especially for the waste world, because everybody has this dream that you can recycle everything and forget that recycling also costs money and also costs environmental elements. Like a few years ago when the Germans created the green dot, the old ladies at home started to wash their yogurt container before they put that in the waste. And well, the money it cost in water is much more than what it brought to the environment. So in Israel, there is a few technologies I'm very interested in that I'm looking at currently, but it's not really worth talking because it's too specific. But in general, I'm more into buying market access. I just bought a team in Australia because from a technology point of view, I think we are not in an extremely innovative industry. But I'll finish with an anecdote because we talk about M&A and we should not forget that M&A is opportunistic also sometimes. We can all plan what we want, but opportunities come. 4 years ago, I had a friend of mine who sent me an MMS with a picture and he said, "Congratulations on your Shanghai factory." So I called him back, I said, "I don't have a Shanghai factory." So it was de facto a nice Chinese guy who set up a nice auto factory. 3 days ago, I have an investment banker that called me and said, "The Chinese leader in your business is to sell." And I looked at it, and it was the guy who copied us. So now I'm looking at buying him.
Okay, so with this promising note about China, about the world, Luke Muller, CEO of OTTO, Chaim Hurvitz, board of TEVA, Miki Federmann, chairman of Federmann and Elbit, and Yair Shamir. I want to thank you. I want to thank the audience, and thank you very much.